Now to the anti-Israel protests sweeping through American universities.
We begin this hour, though, with an escalation in the ongoing protests on college campuses. Protesters are occupying a building at Columbia University.
They got that call only a short time ago from the president, Manu Shafiq here, who's also getting calls to resign and step down because people think she didn't handle this chaos well. So they moved in with those zip ties. They brought in, a special team of people with the NYPD to kind of handle this situation. And then in terms of going in, right, like you said, to go into those windows, it's because they wouldn't come out, and they they were up on the roof, as we saw today, where they were ordering their dinner orders that were getting delivered and pulled up with ropes. So they didn't know exactly how many protesters were inside. We don't even know at this time, right, if they have all of those protesters come.
And these destructive and in some cases violent protests were just the beginning, with rallies and demonstrations spreading to many other universities. But some of the media were sympathetic to this rabble of activists, many of whom are stopping students from attending classes. Here is Joy Reid from MSNBC describing protesters as the best and brightest these universities have to offer.
Of course, the protests have now metastasized nationwide on multiple campuses throughout the country. Universities now routinely are setting the police, many in riot gear, on their best and brightest. You can almost see the eagerness in law enforcement to shut down these protests, which have been mostly peaceful.
Best and brightest probably wouldn't be my choice of adjectives, but Reid had more analysis for her viewers, and it included labelling the protesters future leaders of this country.
We know and see what is happening, but the question is why? Why are universities across the country sicking the cops on their own students and professors, essentially turning the awesome power of the state against the very leaders who will someday inherit it?
It is always amusing how these extreme left-wing activist journalists have such double standards when it comes to protests. But unfortunately, Reid is right. One day, these people will be future leaders. Sophie, let's bring you in here. The protests obviously have made headlines all around the world. You've got Fox and CNN out there pretty much 24/7. It has started to creep into Australia as well. We've seen some demonstrations. What do you make of how the media's covered it broadly?
Well, I think those clips there speak for themselves, Jack. And it doesn't matter what side of this argument you're on, violent protests or any form of violence is not acceptable. You can't excuse that just because you believe with the cause. And I think the journalists here need to have a good look at themselves. They should be reporting on this fairly and accurately and not taking sides and being sympathetic to causes if they are performing actions that in some cases could well be criminal.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a really good point. There are criminal elements to it. There's also been some reports of some pretty horrific, just completely immoral conduct happening. So then for some American broadcasts, I guess it just shows how polarised the states are, that someone would actually stand up and say that these people should be held up and that they are intelligent and the best and brightest. Yeah. I'm not seeing it personally.
But it's interesting too that Reid actually used the word metastasized when she was talking about these rallies. And that's, I would put that in the, yes, this is a cancer and it is spreading. I mean, that's how we use that word. So at the end of the day, these aren't students. This isn't a rallying cry for democracy. This is more Jan 6, which is what the left actually have been rallying against. So I don't see how they can say Jan 6 was terrible, but sure, let's get these students up there and like in everyone's face. And they're turning violent. We've seen with a lot of these US universities, they're turning violent. Now it's coming here. I mean, I think at the end of the day, they have a right to rally, but they don't have a right to violence. And also what we're seeing as well, a lot of them aren't students. There are people coming in who are agitating, who are making this more of an issue than it needs to be.
Yeah, I mean, there's students who can't go and get their education. They should have been dragged off far earlier. And to me, it's extraordinary that a journalist would advocate for that kind of suppression of education and be in favour of it.
And we really need to discuss too the Jewish population and the Jewish students who are finding it really hard to go to these campuses. No one is discussing that. I really think that we need to focus on that.
It's disgusting. They're blocking Jewish people from entering classes.
And they're feeling unsafe.
Yeah, well said.